What if the last thing you ever wrote was never meant to be read? December 1917, France. The ground is frozen, the air burns like smoke, and the war has eaten everything it touches. But in one forgotten trench outside Verdun, a young soldier sits beneath a leaking canvas sheet, clutching a pencil as if it were the only thing keeping him alive. His name is Private Thomas Hale, age 24, a former factory worker from Manchester. He hasn't slept in 3 days. He hasn't smiled in 3 months. And tonight, under the weak glow of a lantern, he begins to write what will become his final letter. My dearest Anna, I don't know if this will reach you. The post gets lost in the mud, same as men do. But if it does, please know, every word I write is for you. As the rain patters against the dugout roof, Hale glances at the photo tucked in his breast pocket, a young woman with a soft smile, hair tied back with a ribbon. The edges of the picture are smudged with dirt and fingerprints, like everything else in this place. He keeps writing, even as artillery rumbles in the distance, the sound of the earth breaking again. The men call their sector the Devil's Garden. It isn't much of a garden, just churned mud, twisted barbed wire, and corpses that resurface every time it rains. Hale's platoon has held this position for 12 weeks, facing the German line less than 200 yards away. In the morning, they'll go over the top again. Orders came down just before dusk, another advance, another push. The officers talk about strategic importance, but to Hale, it just means more names carved into wooden crosses by nightfall. Corporal Jennings, a broad-shouldered Londoner with a scar down his chin, crouches beside him. Writing home again, Tommy. Hale murmurs. Helps me keep sane. Jennings chuckles. Sane? Out here? You're already halfway to mad, mate. They share a cigarette, the ember glowing faintly in the dark like a tiny, defiant star. The smell of tobacco almost covers the stench of rotten gunpowder. Almost. Hale looks toward the horizon. Beyond the mist and the razor wire, somewhere, home still exists, warm light, clean sheets, Anna's laugh echoing down a quiet Manchester street. He wonders if she still waits by the window, counting the days like he does. Later that night, Hale joins the men in the dugout. Someone's managed to get a small gramophone working. It crackles to life with an old tune, Keep the Home Fires Burning. For a moment, the war feels far away. Private Menil starts humming along. Private Clark, the youngest of them all, only 17, grins as he holds a tin of bully beef like it's a feast. They joke about the food, about lice, about anything except the dawn. Think they'll ever stop this madness? Clark asks. Jennings shrugs. When the last poor fool's buried, maybe. Hale doesn't answer. He keeps writing, the pencil scratching softly as the men's laughter fades into uneasy silence. The night drags on like a slow bleed. Rain turns to mist, mist turns to fog, and the fog seems to swallow the world whole. The men sit in silence, waiting, not for orders, but for sleep that never comes. Every so often, a flare arcs across the sky, painting the trenches in ghostly white. For an instant, Hale can see their faces, hollow-eyed, pale, barely more than shadows of who they once were. He thinks of the men he arrived with. 32, now only 9 remain. He pulls out the letter again, reading over the smudged words by the flickering lantern. He wants to say more, to tell Anna how much she saved him, how her letters were the only warmth in this endless cold. But the words won't come. How do you explain hell to someone who's never left the garden? He starts another line anyway. If I don't come home, promise me you'll live enough for the both of us. Promise me you'll see the spring I won't. He folds the paper, tucks it into an envelope, and writes her name with trembling fingers. Anna Whitlock, 23, Rose Street, Manchester. It looks fragile, like something that shouldn't exist in a place like this. From somewhere above, a whistle blows. Not the signal, just the officers testing. But even that sound makes every man flinch. Every heart beats faster, waiting for morning. The dawn doesn't come with sunlight, only a dull grey glow, thick with fog and smoke. The smell of wet earth and cordite clings to everything. Men check their rifles in silence. Hale buttons his coat, fingers brushing the letter in his breast pocket, the one he'll never get to send. Jennings pats him on the shoulder. "Stay close, lad. Don't do anything heroic." Heroic? Hale forces a weak smile. "I'm just hoping not to trip over a corpse." The whistle shrieks. Every muscle tightens. And then, like ghosts rising from graves, they climb the ladders and step into the open. The world erupts. Machine guns chatter from the ridge. Mortar shells burst like thunderclaps, raining mud and metal. Hale runs forward, slipping, stumbling, clawing through craters and wire. The air screams, bullets hissing past his ears like angry bees. A man beside him goes down, no sound, just a collapse. Another screams for his mother. And still, Hale moves forward, because that's all there is to do. Somewhere, a shell lands close. The world flips upside down, light, dirt, blood, silence. When Hale opens his eyes, everything is wrong. The sky is a dirty orange, the air thick and sour. His ears ring like church bells underwater. He tries to move, pain stabs through his side. He's lying in a shell crater, half buried, half alive. Next to him, another man groans, a German uniform. For a long time, they just stare at each other, too weak to lift their weapons. The German, blonde, young, barely older than Clark, breathes heavily. He mutters something Hale can't understand. Then, in broken English, the German says, "You hurt?" Hale blinks. "Yeah. You?" The man nods faintly. "Same." They lie there, surrounded by the dead, listening to the muffled war raging above them. Neither dares move. Neither wants to die. Hours pass. The rain returns, soft and cold. The mud thickens, filling the crater like a grave. The German tears a strip from his uniform and presses it against Hale's wound. Hale, stunned, laughs weakly. "Didn't think you lot were so charitable." The German smiles faintly. War makes strange friends. When night comes again, the battlefield quiets. Only the groans of the wounded remain, fading one by one. The German drifts in and out of sleep, whispering names Hale doesn't know. Hale reaches for his breast pocket, pulling out the letter. It's soaked, stained with blood and dirt, unreadable now. But he holds it anyway, like a relic. "Anna," he whispers into the dark. "I tried to write you the truth, but I think the truth is too heavy to send." The German stirs. "Who is Anna?" "My wife," Hale murmurs. "Back home." The man nods. "Home," he smiles sadly. "I have sister. Greta." They sit in silence again. Two men, enemies on paper, brothers in the dirt. When dawn breaks, the shells start again. The German opens his eyes just once, mouth forming a word, dank. Then stillness. Hale doesn't cry. He just closes the man's eyes and looks toward the horizon where the light begins to rise over the battlefield. 2 days later, stretcher-bearers find him. He's half dead, half buried, clutching the ruined letter. When the war finally ends months later, the letter is sent to Anna anyway, cleaned, dried, sealed in military paper. Most of it unreadable. Only one line survives. "If I don't come home, promise me you'll live enough for the both of us." Years later, in a quiet garden in Manchester, Anna kneels among the daisies, the same kind she once wrote about, and whispers, "I did, Thomas. I did." The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days. Every drop that fell blended into the earth, turning the once solid ground into a sucking, endless swamp of brown. The men were silent now, too tired to curse, too wet to complain. The war had stripped them of the energy to hate it. Private Thomas Hale leaned against the sandbags, shivering under a soaked blanket. His fingers, pale and wrinkled, clutched a torn notebook. Inside it were words for his mother, words that might never reach her. He had written the letter 3 times already. Each version ended up smeared, ruined by rain or tears or mud. But tonight, in the dim orange glow of a flickering lantern, he tried again. "Dear Mother," he wrote, "I hope this reaches you. The nights here are long, and the sky never clears. The guns don't rest, not even when the dead do. But I am still here, still breathing, though sometimes I wonder why." A rumble shook the trench, distant but heavy, artillery fire. He didn't flinch. He'd learned that the shells that mattered were the ones you never heard. The letter took weeks to travel across the ruined veins of Europe. From the muddy pocket of a fallen soldier, it passed through trembling hands, a medic, a clerk, a transport officer, each one pausing for a moment before forwarding it along. The envelope was damp, corners torn, ink smudged by rain and blood, but still, the words survived. The address, written in a young man's hopeful hand, was barely legible. Mrs. Margaret Hale. 12, Willow Lane, Canterbury, England. When it finally arrived, the postman hesitated before knocking. His uniform was worn, his satchel heavy with bad news. He had delivered too many letters like this before. Inside, Mrs. Hale sat by the window, sewing in the dim light. Her hair, once gold, had turned to soft grey, and her hands trembled faintly when she worked. Every day she listened for footsteps outside the door, footsteps that never came. When the knock finally sounded, her heart jolted. The postman stood there, cap in hand, rain dripping from his coat. He didn't need to say anything. She saw it in his eyes. He handed her the envelope with the quiet reverence of a man laying down a flag. "It came from France. From your boy." Then he turned and walked away, leaving her in silence. For a long time, she couldn't bring herself to open it. The paper felt sacred, too fragile to touch, too final to read. She pressed it to her lips, whispering, "Oh, Thomas, my brave boy." That night, after the lamps were dimmed and the rain tapped gently on the roof, she finally unfolded it. The ink was faded, but his words were there, his voice echoing across the sea, across the grave. "Dear Mother, I hope this reaches you. The nights here are long, and the sky never clears." She read every line slowly, her fingers tracing the words as though touching his face. When she reached the last sentence, "I'm coming home, Mother," her tears fell freely, blurring the page once more. But beneath the sorrow, there was something else, something warm. Her son had died with love in his heart, not hatred. He had remembered her. And that meant he hadn't been alone. Weeks later, Mrs. Hale placed the letter in a small wooden box beside his childhood things, a toy soldier, a slingshot, a faded photograph of him in his school uniform. She kept the box on her bedside table, opening it every night before she slept. The town soon learned of Thomas's death. Neighbors came with flowers, with murmured condolences that never felt enough. But what moved them most wasn't his death, it was his letter. Mrs. Hale had shown it to the vicar, who read it aloud during Sunday service. The congregation sat in silence as Thomas's words filled the church, his voice carried through the rafters. They tell us we're heroes, but heroes don't crawl through mud to die beside strangers. Still, if I make it home, I'll tell them about Jennings. When the vicar finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Even the men too old to fight, or too proud to cry. From that day forward, they called it the letter from the trenches. It was copied, printed, and passed around by families who had lost sons of their own. It became a symbol, not of victory, but of humanity. A reminder that behind every uniform, there had been a heart that beat, loved, and broke. In France, the war raged on. Shells fell, men died, and the earth swallowed more names than history could ever recall. But in one small corner of the front, where the mud had long since dried and the grass was beginning to grow again, there stood a rough wooden cross. Carved into it were two names: Private Thomas Hale, Corporal Edward Jennings. And beneath them, written by a steady hand, were the words. They were brothers in all but blood. Years passed. The war ended, the soldiers came home, those who could. Mrs. Hale grew older, frailer, her eyes dim but her spirit unbroken. Every armistice day, she placed a single white flower on her windowsill, facing east toward France. And though the world moved on, she could still hear his voice sometimes, in the rustle of the wind through the trees, in the whisper of rain on the roof. When she finally passed, many years later, the wooden box was found beside her bed. Inside it lay the letter, still folded carefully, still carrying the scent of mud and smoke. On the back, in her delicate handwriting, someone had added one final note. He did come home, in every word.